Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Corey Rosenlee, your HSTA president. Thank you for joining us for today's live briefing for HSTA's response to the governor's threat of furloughs and other COVID-19 related responses. As with previous live broadcasts, we are practicing social distancing and speaking to you live from our homes. Joining me today is HSTA's Deputy Executive Director and Chief Negotiator, Andrea Eshelman, our Vice President, Osa Tui, our Secretary Treasurer, Logan Okita. They are both off camera right now and will be monitoring the comments in our Facebook and YouTube feeds, and will be helping to compile the question and answers at the end. I also want to give a shout out and a thank you to HSTA's Honolulu Chapter President, Inga Park Okuna, who is providing sign language interpretation for us today. I also want to thank Kelly Ka'anaana from Leeward Chapter, who is also helping us to keep track of all the questions as they come in. And so with that, Andy, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. While the fall semester has come to an end and we hope all of our members are taking a well-deserved break, we want you to know that the work of HSTA continues. A lot of things have occurred just in the last couple of weeks related to the governor's threat of furloughs. We would ask that you please share this live feed on your Facebook page or use the share feature on YouTube so that we can make sure as many people as possible see this live broadcast. We're providing this opportunity to try and clarify what we know and share what we're still seeking answers to and gather additional questions related to the furlough threat. Please feel free to type any questions you might have in the comment section on Facebook or YouTube. As Corey indicated, we have individuals monitoring that and we will answer questions at the end. We also encourage members to make sure that you're signed up on our website and receive our email updates. If you are not receiving our emails, please go to bit.ly/HSTA email for instructions. Please continue to check our website as well, hsta.org, for the latest information. Immediately following the briefing, we are going to answer your questions. We will warn you in advance that we're not going to engage in answering personal questions or those related to individual teachers or students. We also ask that you not disclose personal information on Facebook comments or YouTube comments, as this is not a confidential location. If you have individual concerns, please go to our website and click contact. You can also go to hsta.org/contact and your message will be routed to the appropriate person for follow-up. As a refresher, we want to provide a brief review of what's happened over the last couple of weeks related to the governor's threat of furloughs. On Wednesday, December 9th, the governor held a press conference and announced that he would implement furloughs for all state workers starting January 1st. The governor at that time stated that the DOE superintendent, Kishimoto, would have a schedule put out to determine the specific days. The next week, on December 14th, the superintendent emailed out to all employees the schedule for furloughs, indicating that January 4th and February 12th would be the first furlough days, with future furloughs listed as projected. On Friday, December 18th, the HSTA filed a prohibited practice complaint with the Hawaii Labor Relations Board, known as HLRB. The full complaint can be read on our website. In short, we challenged the governor and the superintendent's unilateral imposition of furloughs starting January 4th, which violate our contract. Then last Wednesday on December 23rd, the governor and superintendent announced that as a result of the federal stimulus, on the January furlough day was, quote, no longer being implemented. And the February 12th furlough day and others were dependent on the federal relief and Trump signing the bill. Yesterday, Sunday, December 27th, President Trump signed the stimulus bill, paving the way for approximately $178 million for our schools. However, the governor's message to employees also stated that it's, quote, impossible to provide a date that furloughs will begin. So we are still concerned about the threat. HSTA has not withdrawn our HLRB complaint. We're currently waiting to meet with the employer to get more information regarding their recent announcement delaying furloughs. Once we have that information, we'll make future decisions on our pending legal action and update our members. In the meantime, we're sure members still have questions regarding the threat. Many of those questions we do not yet have answers. Those include, if there are fewer furlough days, will members still see the 9.23% pay cuts? Will the pay cuts, if any, be spread out amongst paychecks during semester 2, or will they be on specific check dates? Why are 12-month teachers being expected to take larger cuts than 10-month teachers? And should we anticipate higher cuts next year if we see smaller cuts this semester? I'm now going to turn it over to Corey, who's going to provide some more details about the financial situation of the state, the federal stimulus package, and the upcoming legislative session. Corey?
Okay, thank you, Andy. First of all, the good news. Congress passed the $900 billion stimulus bill. That bill includes $178 million for Hawaii's K-12 schools, and that money can be used for salaries. HSTA estimates that the cost to avoid furloughs for the next 6 months for all DOE employees would be approximately $42.5 million. So the governor does have the ability now to end furloughs for the rest of the school year. Okay, now the bad news. The budget for next school year is much more difficult. Right now, the Department of Education is facing nearly a $400 million cut for the next fiscal year. This could mean losing over 1,000 teaching positions. As a union, we need to take action to make sure this doesn't happen. The best thing that can happen is that Congress and President-elect Biden pass a new stimulus bill that includes help for the states and additional funding for education. We also need help from our local state legislators to try to find additional revenue. And we know that local legislators right now in Hawaii are trying to do that, and we thank those that are trying to help. It is so important that during this time that you reach out to your local legislator to share how the budget cuts and furloughs will impact you, our schools, and our keiki. And with that, I'll turn it back to Andy.
So related to the immediate threat of furloughs, is the funding for next school year. As Corey indicated, it's pretty challenging. We've begun to bargain our next contract. So the current contract ends June 30th. The next contract starts July 1st. We exchanged initial proposals in early December, and we anticipate that the bargain is going to be very challenging given the state's fiscal outlook. As Corey shared, public schools are facing drastic cuts for next school year. In the 2021-22 school year, operating expenses are scheduled to be cut by approximately $265 million. In addition to that $265 million, the governor is expecting the DOE to find $128 million in salary savings through furloughs or other salary cuts. All of that planned cuts, or all those planned cuts, are affecting the planning for academic and financial plans for next school year. The superintendent and the charter schools were told to do 3 models, a 10%, a 15%, and a 20% cut. And your principals are actively working on their academic financial plans right now. If your principal has not yet talked to your staff about your academic financial plan for next school year, they should be doing that within the next month. In regards to charter schools in particular, we understand that the governor's budget plans for $14.4 million in cuts to the per pupil allocation for next school year. These are in proportion to the same types of cuts that the DOE is planning for. It is unclear if there's going to be additional cuts related to the furloughs that the governor is seeking from all state employees for charter schools. This means that next school year, teachers who are emergency hires, probationary, or in specialized positions such as resource teachers are the ones most at risk to be impacted by staff reductions and or possible non-renewal of contracts for those who are not yet tenured. In the coming weeks, we plan to put out more information related to teacher transfer and staff reductions, including a members only webinar. Please make sure you're signed up for our email list for the latest updates and to register once that webinar becomes available. Specific to the immediate threat of furloughs in spring of 2021, we can provide the following. First, we have asked the DOE that they require all principals to reach out by phone and mail to notify employees that they are not going to be furloughed on January 4th and that they do need to report to work for the teacher workday. This is to ensure that teachers get the message. We would encourage you to make sure your colleagues and friends know that the furlough has been canceled for January 4th as well. If you or one of your colleagues have made travel arrangements or other personal business for January 4th, which you can't change, we encourage you to request personal leave so that you're not considered AWOL on that teacher workday, as employees are expected to report. Regarding charter schools, while the charter schools did receive some budget cuts this year of approximately $6 million, they are not part of any announcement for the furloughs for the DOE. So if your charter school has announced any cuts or furloughs for spring semester, you need to let HSTA know right away, as we will likely have to address your charter school situation separately. Secondly, we are trying to confirm that the state has undone any possible payroll system programming for the January furloughs. Our concern is that even though the governor announced on the 23rd last week that they were pulling back on the January furloughs, our concern is that DAGs had already programmed the furloughs into the system. And so once we confirm that, we will let members know that information as well. Lastly, things are very unclear. The governor could change his mind later in the spring. He could attempt to impose furloughs again. And this would still be a violation of our collective bargaining agreement, and we would definitely challenge any attempt to impose. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask Logan and Osa to share with us and take some time for questions. Logan's been monitoring all of your feedback as we've been talking. Just a reminder, if you type your questions into the comment section on Facebook or YouTube threads, we will make sure that we get those asked and answered. If for some reason you don't hear or see an answer to your question, or you have a specific situation that you don't want to share publicly on Facebook, please go to hsta.org/contact, and we will have someone follow up with you regarding your concern. So Logan, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have some who turned in questions earlier and then a few from the Facebook feed. I'm going to start with one that was submitted earlier. Will HSTA leadership take furloughs and cuts with teachers too?
So thank you for that question. First of all, our biggest hope right now is to avoid furloughs altogether, not just because it would impact potentially my salary or others, just because it's wrong to cut teachers' pay. We know the impact that would have. Saying that, of course we would. Personally, I can speak for myself that if anything were to happen, I would want to make sure that I go through what our teachers go through. But this is a great time to point out that we have thousands of volunteers within HSTA that don't get paid at all. People believe that our board, our chapter presidents, they're all doing a volunteer. Even our vice president and secretary treasurer, they basically volunteer their time to do this one. So thank you for that question, but I think it's often misunderstood about how HSTA works. Logan?
Okay, the next question, sorry, I hadn't unmuted myself. If the furloughs go through, why does the governor and the media keep saying that the 9.23 pay cut equates to 2 days per month, but the DOE schedule is for 6 days in 6 months?
And you want to take that one? Go ahead.
Yes, so our understanding is that the superintendent went to the governor at some point prior to his December announcement and requested to have less impact on the DOE, because if they did more than a few days, they were going to impact the students' instructional year. As you can see from what the plan the superintendent put out, some of the days were on teacher work days or on the breaks, but there were days that were instructional. So that basically tells us that the governor approved less furloughs. The part that we're not clear on is whether they are intending to impose the 9.23% pay cut or just the true value of whatever 1, 2, 3, 4 days of furloughs would be for your pay.
Thank you. And in regards to the 6 days, can you give us more information on the possible cut of for 12-month teachers, or the difference for 12-month teachers?
Meaning
that why are they having a separate amount of days? And
we don't know. We don't know the answer to that. I actually had a meeting scheduled last week, Wednesday, that got canceled by the department. We were supposed to be talking about the furloughs on the 23rd. I think they canceled it in part because they knew the governor's announcement was coming. I have a meeting this Wednesday, and that is scheduled to be part of my question this Wednesday, is why were they looking at the 12-monthers having more days?
Okay, and then this also goes with 12-month teachers, but for all positions as well. If our position is eliminated, are teachers going to be forced into transferring to another school, or are we qualified for unemployment benefits?
So if you are a tenured teacher and your line assignment changes for next school year. So for example, let's say you are a resource teacher at the school level and your principal says, okay, I no longer can afford to have a resource teacher, a coach, I'm now going to put you back in the classroom. Then that is your line assignment for the next school year. No one has rights to a specific line assignment or position from year to year. So you would be placed somewhere else in the school year, or excuse me, in the school or the department that you're working in. If there are less positions available and more tenured teachers at a given work site, then someone will be staff reduced, and then the district office will need to find a position for you. And there's a whole staff reduction procedure, and that is what we're going to do a webinar on later this month. So generally, no, you're not going to qualify for unemployment because you will have a position. The folks who may be affected by that is someone who has had their contract non-renewed, meaning you are a non-tenured teacher and you are non-renewed for the next school year. And depending on the circumstances and what's going on, that would be something that the unemployment office would have to deal with. But at the earliest that would be happening would be August, because obviously you're still employed through the end of the school year, and in the summer you're not working.
Thank you, Andy. So the governor said that HGEA federally funded clerks will not be furloughed because they're 100% federally funded. But what about federally funded teachers? Will they still be furloughed?
So our understanding from the state is that any fully funded through the federal government are not going to be furloughed. Again, these were questions that we wanted to get clarification on. I do know there are a number of teachers who are partially funded by federal grant money. We are trying to get more information. So once we have more information, we would definitely pass that on.
And another furlough question. February 12th is scheduled to be an Institute Day. If that ends up being a furlough day, will Institute Day be rescheduled or canceled?
Again, these were questions that we're trying to get clarification from the department on. February 12th happens to be an Institute Day for Kauai. And so we intended to have a discussion with the department to get clarification on whether they wanted us to move the Kauai Institute Day, and then they were going to have it as just an instructional day, or what would happen. And so that's another area that we're trying to get clarification on. Potentially, just as the violation of our contract for the January 4th teacher work day, potentially February 12th would also be a violation. And it would be additional violation for Kauai because they lost their Institute Day. So we're, again, trying to get clarification on those.
And I'll just add, our hope, remember, still is that we won't have furloughs at all, but we are still moving ahead, that we are planning on having Institute Day virtually this year. And I just hope the teachers continue to plan on that, attending virtually if they can.
Thank you. And this isn't a question, but an opinion. Because of the major budget cuts and furloughs, this member believes that HSTA should demand a restructuring of the DOE. It's way too top heavy, and plenty of those pencil pushing positions should be eliminated, or they should be taking the furloughs, not the teachers. How would we be able to support that view?
Okay, so thank you. And I actually hear this quite often. So let me try to best address this one. Someone came up to me and said, if we just cut the superintendent salary, we'll be able to solve this crisis. And you're talking about, a few $100,000, or even if you cut lots of salaries, a couple million. Right now, we're looking at a $400 million potential cuts to the Department of Education next school year. Also, when you dig deep into the numbers, most of the funding in Hawaii actually goes down to the school level. And that's why when they're talking about cuts, it's affecting the school level so much. And then even if you look at the DOE, where do you want to cut? I mean, a lot of the money is spent on things like busing, special education, even things like gender equity, making sure that we have money for our facilities and the people that do these facilities, things like the Office of Hawaiian Education, athletics. There's so many things that when we think about the DOE, you start looking at the actual offices and people say, well, I don't want to cut that. I don't want to cut that. And at the end of the day, there's very little at that top that would deal with these large budget cuts that we're dealing with.
Thank you. And then in line with budget cuts and going back to cutting positions, a principal told this teacher that their line was being cut because the budget was due on December 15th. Is this still holding true?
So what it sounds like is that that principal has made a decision that based on the weighted student formula monies or their special ed monies that they are told to plan on, they are eliminating a position. So all of this planning is prospective. So it's all for next school year. That could change at any point. We could see additional monies or revenues increase, or we could see changes in the budgets and potentially positions could come back. That does not necessarily mean that it is final, but that is what is likely going to show up for that teacher in the tentative line assignments that are going to be posted sometime in mid-February. So hopefully that answers the question.
And what about teachers who are at the district level? If their positions are eliminated, what happens to them?
So it really depends. There's a whole series of staff reduction rules that get triggered, and it depends on the situation. So it also depends on the type of position that teacher is in. Some teachers take temporary assignments to the district or state office, so they have some return rights back to their school. In other cases, they're just placed into the district or a state level pool to get reassigned to another position. So there's a number of factors that come into play, but as long as they're tenured, all of those things will get triggered and staff reduction procedures will occur.
With this economic crisis, shouldn't teachers take pay cuts like everyone else?
Okay, so, you know, I saw the op-ed in the Civil Beat today from Lee Cataluna, you know, advocating the same thing. And first of all, the first part of that premise is wrong because not everyone is suffering. In fact, there are people that even during this recession have done very well. The stock market has gone up, expensive homes are selling at higher rates. And at the end of the day, it's not about teachers. I know it's cutting our pay, but what happens is that when we cut teachers' pay, we know that teachers in other states are making more and our teachers leave. So we saw the repercussions from the 2009 recession when teachers lost pay. And what happened is that our pay did not become competitive. And that's what led to the teacher shortage crisis of over not having 1,000 positions of qualified teachers, which, you know, impacts mostly our high need students. So when we talk about furloughs, it's not about just trying to protect pay. It's trying to make sure that we keep and hold on to our teachers to make sure that, you know, all of our keiki have qualified teachers.
Thank you. If we have to furlough in the 21-22 school year, this teacher asks if we can please just extend summer break to make it consistent for families and to save on the utilities required for air conditioning.
So two things I'll just say on that. One is the next school year, if there's going to be furloughs or pay cuts, those have to be negotiated because that's what we're doing right now is we're in bargaining for our next contract. That set aside, any change in the school year calendar also requires the Board of Education to approve the change in the calendar. Historically, the Board of Ed does not look kindly upon extending the summer. They like the schedule the way it is. And I anticipate as chief negotiator that there's going to be a pushback on any effort to try and shorten the school year. That being said, we're in bargaining and we're going to have to look at all of those factors.
Thank you. And to go with the being about the next contract, is it possible for our next contract to reduce rights that currently exist in our current contract?
So anything that's in our current contract would have to be negotiated, right? So if you were going to take away a right like duty-free lunch, it would have to be negotiated and it would have to be ratified if we were going to do that. I can assure you that your bargaining team is not and has not gone into bargaining with the mindset that they're going to give away things that have been long fought for our members.
Do you think the DOE will offer a retirement deal to teachers who are close to retiring?
So I'll give a short answer and then I'm sure Corey can give the legislative thing, but short and sweet is anything related to retirement is state law. So it's not even within the DOE's legal ability to offer something. And I'll let Corey address any sort of theories that are floating around early retirement with state workers in the legislature. They would have to change the law.
So, those ideas have been floating around. I know we heard about that happening potentially at UH, but even that's sort of been pushed aside because at the end of the day, there's no money to offer those early incentives. And the other concern is we can't afford to lose our teachers. We already started off with a deficit. And so the idea is if more people retire, we just won't have enough teachers in the system. So I know that idea has been floating around, but I don't think I've heard any serious suggestions that it actually occurs.
Thank you. And so this has been a question on everyone's mind for a while now. What will happen to the shortage differentials, such as the SPED differential and the hard to staff differential?
Yeah, so this is hard right now because, unless there's another stimulus package or something else, right now the Department of Education for this year alone is looking at $95 million of money that is unmet. And so they're going to try to use part of the stimulus money to meet that burden. But going forward, it's going to be really difficult this year because of the revenue decreases to make sure you fund something like the differentials. HSTA is going to continue to ask for them. We know how successful they have been. But I'll be frank, it's going to be a hard ask to try to continue them.
Thank you. If a probationary teacher is let go due to lack of teaching positions, will their probationary status freeze?
So generally, if the department does not have a position and they non-renew the contract for that reason, in our experience, what ends up happening is, yes, it's frozen. And then when they can offer a position, then when they come back, they will restart. If someone leaves the department of their own, free will, that does not occur, right? If they just say, I quit. So we want to tell people to make sure that they don't just quit, that they hang in there, wait, see what's going to happen, because there's going to be a lot of moving parts in the next 6 to 8 months before we actually get to the start of the new school year. And
I'll just add on to that, I hope that both our new teachers and our veterans, really the worst case scenario is to lose some of our teachers. And that's why, this is not happening immediately. We have some time. And I hope that as a union, we will take action, hopefully, to try to avoid these altogether. And I, want to reiterate that point. Even with the furloughs, we've continued to try to push, but we've been successful so far. And I hope that we will continue to make sure that we do not lose any more teachers.
Thank you. And to go with the question about probationary teachers, what about charter school teachers who do not officially have tenure? Are they considered tenured if they have 3 years of service at their charter school?
If teachers are working at a charter school and they are licensed and would be qualified for probation and they have served that time, then we would consider them tenured, yes. However, we do have charter schools that attempt to try and deny people tenure. I think the larger and more problematic thing for charter school teachers is that there's really no such thing as a staff reduction. There's no other school for you to be staff reduced to. So if your school has 10 positions and you can only afford 8 next year, then that means 2 people are going to be laid off. And that's why we want folks to let us know as soon as their administration are notifying them of these types of things, because those are going to require additional negotiations and discussions with each individual charter school.
Thank you. And since we're in a pandemic, if you're hired for a certain position and return expecting to work in that position, can you be reassigned without your knowledge?
Any sort of reassignment, regardless of what time of year it is, has to be with notification of the teacher. That's a requirement in your contract. It is not with agreement, however. So they can come to you and say, for the good of the educational program, we are making XYZ changes. This is why, and they have to notify you. But there's no mutual agreement that has to occur.
And this one goes with the shortage differentials. Are we continuing to fight for compression pay? There are a lot of teachers that have taught for 20 plus years who have been waiting for a raise for a long time.
Absolutely.
But I want to just, point out, this is something that we know happened because of the last recession, that we got compressed, and this is something that we will continue to ask for. But I just want to be very direct with all of our teachers that right now, with this legislative session and with the amount of cuts that we're looking at, what we're trying to do basically is try to hold on to as much as possible as well. So, we'll do our best to try to fight for our teachers, but I think we need to make sure that everyone's understanding the very deep hole right now the state is in and what we have to fight for.
Thank you. And I know we have just a few more minutes for questions. I don't think this is necessarily a question, but it's definitely a statement that needs to be made, that education is always the first to be cut and where are our priorities in our state. Do you want to respond, Corey?
I agree. It's right now what we're looking at with potential cuts is 25% cut to the Department of Education. This could impact over 1,000 teachers. This is going to impact our keiki. It just seems like we've gone through this before. And that's why it's so important, to fight against the furloughs, to fight against the cuts. And, I want to give a shout out to some of our legislators, like Representative Luke and Senator De La Cruz, that have been fighting to stop the furloughs and trying to find the money. And we've got to continue that fight, because I really hope that we don't have these kind of cuts.
Thank you. And one quick question that's non-furlough related, but very important as we're returning for the semester. Do employers have the legal, or especially our administrators, have the legal right to know if we have a health condition as the deciding factor for being allowed to telework?
So there are two types of telework situations. If someone is requesting telework for a health condition, I personally have a health condition and I am requesting an accommodation to telework because of the risk of being in a work site that might expose me to COVID. You have now started an ADA interactive process, and they do have the right to ask for more information about that health status. If you are requesting to telework separate and apart from your health condition, then they're just going to follow the normal telework procedures that the department has established, and they're going to do an assessment straight on that. i.e., does your position require you to be on campus to work with students because students are reporting to campus? If that is the case, then you're likely going to be denied a telework. But yes, if you have requested telework as part of an accommodation for your health condition, they have the right to ask for more information because that has triggered what's called the interactive ADA process.
And Logan, with that, I think that's going to have to be our last question. I want to make sure that we try to finish up here. And so, first of all, thank you all for joining us today. During this time, it's been very important that our members can reach out, and we want to make sure that we have your trust, and we try to have as much communication as possible so that as we find out things, we're sharing that with you. During this time, it's so important that we have compassion for each other. This is a very difficult time, and reaching out and taking care of your fellow colleagues, especially our keiki, because it's so important. Right now that we are the stability in their lives, and some of our keiki, they look to us to make sure that they have our classes, even if we're doing them online and virtually, make sure we reach out to them. And last of all, hope. This is not going to last forever. Hopefully we'll have vaccinations for our teachers and our students soon, and we can go back to educating and doing what we love in teaching. I want to send out a thank you again. First of all, I want to thank all of our teacher leaders across the state for all the hard work they're doing and the amazing work that our staff has done during this time to make sure that we keep our schools safe and that we make sure that we fund education. Without all of our volunteers across the state, we wouldn't be able to do what we can do from HSTA. So again, I want to thank Andrea Eshelman, our Deputy Executive Director and our Chief Negotiator, Vice President Osa Tui, and Secretary Treasurer Logan Okita. I want to thank our sign language interpreter, Inga Park Okuna, and Kelly Ka'ana'ana, who are monitoring online. I want to thank our great communication staff, Kyoki Kerr, Terry Inafuku, and Chris Schubert for all the work that they've done putting this all together. If you've missed any portion of this live stream, the video will be archived on our Facebook and our YouTube pages. Please keep in mind the situation is constantly changing and some of the information that we provide today may no longer be accurate if you watch this at a later date. Please check our website, www.hsta.org, for the latest updates. If you are subscribed to Member Matters, you will receive an email with the latest developments. And again, thank you so much for joining us today.